So we've heard during the day several comments about how regulations and legislations are a little bit far from being realistic. Somehow it's hard to execute what's being asked, and we also had a comment that legislators and regulators do not have the experience needed to respond to threats and to share information. What can you say, Thabet?
Thank you everyone for coming today, and thank you for allowing me the opportunity to present our experience in Central Bank of UAE and how to manage information security here in the banking sector. I want to highlight that Central Bank looks at information security as a very important area of concern. We understand that the technology that's driving our day-to-day life is continuously evolving, and it's very important for a regulator to actually co-op with all these innovations. One of the main important factors for a banking sector is the secrecy of the data for the customers and how this data is being maliciously used against the banking customers. Because of this, the Central Bank of UAE has understood the importance of the information security of the banks and worked with the banking sector, especially the UBF, the Bank Federation, in establishing the Information Security Committee, and also try to support the initiatives from the Banking Federation and making sure that the awareness about information security is spread across all the banks. We understand that different banks has different level of maturity in terms of information security. Some banks will be very mature and they will have the best skill set and the best technologies, but some banks will be disadvantaged in this area and they will require more assistance. As a regulator, we treat all the banks similarly because we see this as a critical infrastructure for the UAE. All the banks in UAE and in the GCC across all the world, all of us are connected. We deal with each other day to day in fulfilling what the customers need. We accept deposits, we give loans, we facilitate payment systems, payment transactions. So we understand the issue of information security will fall under the weakest link. The weakest link of this chain could be one of us, could be the regulator, could be the bank. So our role here in the UAE Central Bank is to make sure that we give to all the banks the necessary awareness and the minimum standard that they can work on, and encourage them to make sure that they fulfill their day-to-day operation with taking into consideration security in mind. So the question is that yes, we as Central Bank, we understand information security. The banks in UAE here, they understand information security, but we see they need to work harder to make sure that we are best in line, best in the industry, and best in the whole GCC and in the world. Yeah.
Pak, how do you contribute to this? Are you discussing with regulators, with the legislators? What are the best practices? How are you sharing information? Is there any cooperation between banks and legislators other than through the UAE Federation?
Yeah, absolutely there are. So we're a pretty global bank, right? There's not a region of the world that we're not in. We're in the Middle East, we're in Asia, we're in Europe, we're in the Americas. So you name a regulator, and we're getting regulated by them, right? So UAE Central Bank, MAS, HKMA, PRA, just you name it, we're getting regulated by them. I want to talk a bit about what it's like to be the teams on the ground responding to them. But just to answer your point, yeah, there's a great deal of interaction that goes on between us and regulators, but as my colleague is saying here, it needs to be, it needs to add value, right? So there needs to be the right people asking the questions, and then they need to follow up with those responses. So for example, we'll get a lot of requests from, let's say, an unnamed regulator, we won't name them, and it will just say, tell us about your intelligence capability, or tell us about your intelligence collection capability, right? And there's we could say anything to that. They never validate our responses. They never check to see that what we're saying we're actually doing. Right? We could say, yeah, we have this great collection capability, and in reality we have nothing. Okay, so there is that. But in terms of the exchange of, say, industry best practice and advice for as a catch-all for that. There just has to be those relationships in place, because very often the people who talk at a senior level to regulators aren't the people who should be having those conversations. They're not the SMEs on the ground, right? So we have, excuse me, we have a team who sort of interface between the SME teams and the regulators, and they in themselves are quite knowledgeable, and then they're able to transfer that that advice and that expertise to regulators. So just allow me 5 minutes just to paint a picture here, right? So in the year 2017, the Standard Chartered Bank Information Security team were audited 400 times in a single year, 400 times. So that's just what was on the books. I mean, that was just what we're aware of, like what was written down. That translates to something in the region of 3,000 RFIs, right? So that's like, I mean, just for our team, threat intelligence, I spend on average something like 40% of my day responding to RFIs from regulators. Okay, so now if those RFIs are like I've just mentioned, like with this unnamed regulator, tell me about your intel sharing capability, and then there's no validation there. I question what the value is with that, right? Why are they asking, and then where's that going to? Now I know, that they may collect all the responses, and then they'll see, where some banks are lacking with their, say, in their IAM capability, so they'll legislate to bring that up. But I think there needs to be, first of all, the right people asking the questions, and then the validation as well.
I just want to follow up about this topic. As a central bank, we cannot micromanage every transaction and every dealing with the bank, and either within the bank or between different banks in UAE, or for example, or overseas. Auditing a bank, it should be a self-audit, audit from the bank themselves to protect their assets. At the end, the customer information or whatever kind of assets, it's owned by the bank, protected by the bank, and this trust is given from the customer to the bank. Now, what we are recommending and supporting here is that the banking sector actually they need to do their own risk assessments. So, doing a self-assessment, understanding what are your assets, how critical it is, and benchmarking this against other industries, either in the region or outside, helps the bank to actually react to this incident much more faster, because at the end, any regulator in any world will take time until actually it gives the proper reaction to actually force something on ground. So the first line of defense is the banks themselves. The banks need to protect themselves. They need to invest. They need to hire the right skill set. They need to do their own homework day and night. And we recommend that they follow a clear risk assessment process that covers all their assets, all their critical assets that they value, their IPs, and make sure that they have the proper administrative and technical controls against it. Now, there are some things that should be minimum, standard should be there. Could be like the policies, procedures, the responsibility from the board, from the CEO, and from a specific person within the environment that should be there, and the regulator should be involved in making sure that these basics are there. But at the end, the banks, they are already understanding the business. They know that everything is moving towards technology, and it's just a matter of just transferring the data from physical form to an electronic form. So they need to apply the same kind of protection like what they did 20 years ago, today and in the future.
Thabet, is there any legislations regarding liability? So what if that bank does not have enough security?
Basically, in all banking laws, there are liabilities in terms of the bank protecting the customer data or the interest of the customer. Now, this will fall the same, either it's an information or physical protection, or if it's a proven neglect from the bank himself. Now, this I think this is the supervision. They have the means and the controls, and the law allows for these kind of penalties. But we didn't reach up to that level yet. But in terms of the law here in UAE, the law has the teeth to actually force these kind of things. But we don't see any need for it, because we know the banks are actually trying their best to make sure that they follow the best practices and making sure that they implement these to protect the assets of the customers.
Pak, do you think that really legislators are following the pace of cyber threats? So threats are very fast, and it's evolving enormously every day. So how are they following that pace? And with so much regulations and so much requests, do you think they're holding you from protecting or from doing your job?
Well, better be careful how I answer that, Hiba. I think it varies from regulator to regulator. There are some regulators who seem to be a lot more, I'll use the word aggressive, but you know what I mean. They're much more proactive with reaching out to their constituents than others. There are some regulators who seem to be more current. I'm happy to say that UAE Central Bank very in touch with their constituents very regularly. We get a lot of threat alerts from them. A lot of them are very current, and a lot of them actually help us a lot with how we view the Middle East in terms of the cyber threat and how we respond to it. And then others, as I say, there are differences there. The point as to whether or not it stops us from doing our job is interesting. As I say, we spend a lot of teams can spend a lot of their time responding to these requests. Okay, now that's fine for the compliance team; that's their job. But yeah, we're a frontline team, right? Our job is to protect the bank, not to respond to regulatory requests. Now that said, if sometimes there is a lot of benefit there, because they're actually asking us to look at things that we may not have considered before. So that they're asking us to look at, do we have intelligence collection plans for our collection capability? Oh, actually, no, we didn't. Right? So maybe we need to look at that. And so it does sort of raise the baseline standard across the group. I would say, on balance, it adds value. So that's part of protecting the bank.
And one of the things that we try to understand when we send any kind of request to the banks is that we ask questions that actually they have the data for. So because they are mandated by other jurisdictions and other countries, or basically a specific standard to have these kind of information. And by time, actually, you see this is the minimum and the standard, like for example, an ISO standard. We try to align our approach to the standards, and when we ask something that we know how much time it will take to collect this data. At the end, the bank can come back with telling me that I cannot collect this data, and it will take, for example, 6 months. We can go into case-by-case scenario, but we know, because we collect this data for our day-to-day operations also. So we know the amount of time it takes. We know the amount of experience that's required, and it just needs from the banks to be more structured in a way how to collect this data, and consistent. Yeah.
So, I'll open the stage for questions from the audience. We still have about 4 minutes for questions. Any questions from the audience? Okay. Actually, I still have a question. It's about the emerging of fintech, IoT, blockchain. There's a lot of new technologies that are emerging and that we're adapting to. So, does that bring more regulations?
It doesn't mean that any new technology brings more regulation. We need to understand first the use case. How the technology works, what is the use case behind it, how exactly it will be used to deliver the service to the banks and the customers. My understanding, for example, blockchain. Blockchain is a technology there's a hype around it. There is a lot of talk about replacing the current currencies, or I see it differently. I see it that, okay, you have blockchain now. What's required to run the system? You require a lot of infrastructure investment to do a specific use case that you can actually do with the existing infrastructure. So unless we have the proper use case, the clear use case, the killer use case to actually justifies all these investments and force the regulator to actually start regulating this, then we can look at it. Now, from a central bank perspective, we always also try to understand this technology. So we are launching now the FinTech committee to make sure that we have this discussion with the industry, with the banks, on the use of the FinTech technologies, for example, blockchain or any other technologies, to help us understand what exactly these use cases that the banks wants to actually utilize. For example, securities or insurance, or for any kind of smart contracts type of applications, or for example, check clearing. We see that, for example, this could be used for check clearing, for example. So this committee or the focus group with the banking sector will help us to understand, create a POC, understand all the aspects related to the day-to-day operations, the back office functions, the interaction between the systems and the customers, and also the security aspects of it, the type of data that will be shared, who will have access to it, the governance in terms of who's allowed to modify, delete, or delete all these kind of information. This we will not understand until actually we try to experiment this new technologies. Yeah.
Pak, you're regulated by many legislators in the world, and now we have the GDPR, which will take effect in May in 2018. How are you getting ready? I know you have clients all over the world, you have European clients, and how do you get ready to such changes in regulations?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, and it's not just GDPR. I mean, there's obviously the new legislation that's just coming out of China now for new cybersecurity, and then Singapore, they're standing that up. And it's actually crazy how the lack of understanding in the early stages of what that's actually going to mean. Because when these things break, yeah, the first thing that we do is we reach out to folks out in those countries or in those regions that will be affected, and everyone's asking the same question: how's this going to affect us? How's this going to affect us? So, I mean, on a group level, how that's playing out is that you've got folks from the legal and compliance department working through the legislation, picking out what it's going to mean specific for us in terms of, how are we going to have to look after our data? If we're are we able to move it out of the region? Are we able to move it stay in country? What does this mean in terms of compliance requests, audit requests? What does this mean in terms of self-regulation, as my colleague was saying there? And it's a massive piece of work, and then it's about rolling it out to everyone in the bank. So making that understood at different levels. It's not by any means something that can happen quickly. just understanding the intricacies of that legislation is in itself a massive task. Just to paint that into perspective, this, I can't speak that specifically for GDPR, but what's more relevant for us is the China legislation, where it's talking about Chinese sovereignty with data, right? It's basically ascribing more traditional concepts of sovereignty to cyberspace. How does that impact our, say, forensic response if we need to go and image a machine in the People's Republic of China? What does that mean in terms of taking that data out of that country? It's pretty complicated. So how we're reacting to that, it's a group response involving many different teams, and then laying that down to the guys on the shop floor.
Any questions from the audience?
For me, I want to highlight one of the topics that was raised today morning about the sharing platform and how Central Bank is involved in the platform itself. Now, I just want to highlight, I wanted to raise my hand, but because of time, I couldn't. The sharing platform, we actually encourage this from the UBF to actually have this platform, because it's a way for us to actually understand the sector itself, because it allows us to have the common platform where we can actually talk and discuss and share all the IOCs. And when I say IOCs, I say this is the indication of compromise, which is not related to the customer data. It's related to the way how the attack has happened. For example, an IP address, or it could be a technical terminologies, but this is that there will be no customer data shared in this kind of platform. The only data that will be shared is only technical, unrelated to a specific person or an identity. No one will know this information is related to which bank and to which customer. This we had made it clear to the committee members and the UBF to make sure that this is implemented. And I think the platform that we have is already being implemented in other countries and following the same kind of process. And we're planning actually to start using the platform and make sure we actually get involved and utilize this for our own also. Because as you understand that Central Bank is running critical infrastructure here in UAE. We're running the payment systems, and we are also connected to other GCC and international organizations. Having Central Bank or any organization as the weakest link is not good for anyone. So the faster we get the information, the faster the actual respond to it. I saw one research a few days ago about the social engineering experiment that's sending an email to a mass of employees and try to trick them into clicking a link. Based on this experiment, it takes just the full population of all the employees actually reacts to this email in 24 hours. We need to be faster than 24 hours. We need to be actually in minutes to actually respond to any threat. Based on the statistics that I saw, the first person clicked on the link actually took him 5 minutes to actually receive the email and start clicking on that link. And with the latest kind of attacks that's happening now, it's it's zero-day attacks. So the first person will be only infected in 5 minutes. So we need to move faster. And I see the platform for sharing the information will help. It's a stepping stone to help us achieve that level. Now, the more we go into integration, automation, I believe this will actually help us a lot. And from my experience, because I'm on the ground every day with the community, there are other ways of communicating. We actually started to set up WhatsApp groups 2 years ago to actually facilitate this kind of information between all the banking sector. And it actually helped a lot. We as Central Bank also started getting information from other sector regulators, like for example, TRA or NISA or any other entities in Dubai Security Center, alarming us on specific incidents that they, based on their research, they discovered it's targeting the banking sector in UAE. And we immediately share this information with the banks. Now, we want something to be faster, to react fast, because the way that's being shared now is basically an official circular. But the more we go into automation, the more we go into big data, and the more we actually expand in the banking sector, in credit cards, in online banking, in now we see crowdfunding and all these kind of technologies, the more we actually need to react fast and help the banking sector to adopt and to help react on this for these zero-day attacks. That's it.
Perfect, thank you. So we wrap up the session. Thank you for your participation and thank you for your time.